For the overwhelming majority of the votes, at least half of the votes almost, went to Rebirth or Resurgence being their go-to mode, and that's over the default Verdansk, over Iron Trials, over the brand new Realism mode. I wish there was more spaces. We got Plunder in there. It wasn't all that popular. We do have buyback solos, which is probably one of the better forms of solos, but everyone has a different preference. There's also Mini Royale, there's the truck mode, there's all these other modes, the Haunting of Verdansk. There's a lot of different LTMs. Resurgence got a lot of the votes, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll explain what Resurgence has that Verdansk doesn't currently have, and what we can expect to see, hopefully, with the new integration and some of those other things coming to Verdansk, what we'd like to see for future updates. If you enjoyed the video, learn something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button if you're brand new and want to find your way back. Double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. One of the biggest things that I think contributes to this is that the games are significantly shorter. The average match of Verdansk is around 25 minutes. Iron Trials kind of solved this a little bit, bringing it down to about 22 if you ended up making it to late game, top 5 or something like that. When it comes to Rebirth, it starts with a smaller number of people. Even with the extreme mode, it still ends in about 12 minutes just because of the way the zones collapse and the mechanics that they have with the extreme mode. The lobby still dies out relatively quickly, regardless if it's 40 players, 60 players, or 100 players. They all last about 12 minutes, which means you can essentially get twice as many matches in if you're making it all the way to endgame. Most people aren't crazy good at the game, which is perfectly understandable. They play it casually, so maybe they even get more reps than that in, and there's not as much time wasted when you play Rebirth. For example, if you land over in Verdansk, you land, you get looted, you go get a loadout. 8 minutes later, you get into your first gunfight, you die, and then you go to the gulag, and then maybe you get the ballistic knives and you get some kind of weird RNG fight and you get destroyed, or the timer runs out, whatever. You get eliminated after 8 minutes and you don't really get a chance to do anything. And you're back to the lobby, you wasted 8 minutes essentially. Versus with Rebirth, if you have a bad start, you just queue again and you're back into it. Loadout drops in, and there's a lot of other things with that. But on top of that, the other issue is the number of cheaters that you're going to run into at Verdansk and how much time wasting that is. Regardless if you're below average, middle, the pack, or above average, or casual or hardcore player where you're playing all this time, you hate running into cheaters. So what ends up happening is if you run into a cheater in Verdansk and you put in like 18 minutes into a match and then you run into a cheater, or the lobby dies quicker because you ran into a cheater, you didn't realize it until the end, you essentially wasted 18 minutes. If that cheater rolls up on you, dumpsters you really didn't have much of a chance. In Rebirth, if you run into them like within the first 3 or 4 minutes, half the match, you exit, queue back up, report them, block them, whatever, and you're back into it. So a lot of those issues get kind of solved by that, and plus I think there's just less cheaters overall within that mode because of the unpredictableness of the spawn protection that you get, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But overall, that's kind of what I think gravitates a lot more casual players to it, and the most of the player base is quote-unquote casual, despite if you play 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week, you're still mostly casual. Until you're getting like 6 hours a day or something crazy. But that's a completely different story. On top of that, they've also made it super casual friendly, which Verdansk has kind of had elements of that, but it's gotten away from some of those elements. With Iron Trials, it doesn't make it as casual friendly. It does raise the skill gap. They did throw in the Realism, which doesn't seem all that popular, especially compared to like Plunder. It's very on par with Plunder, and Plunder, most people, they just go in there, level guns, try some loadouts, but for the most part, people aren't actually looting up cash. There are people, there will, and it's okay to enjoy whatever mode you want for whatever reason and play however you want. But I'm just saying, for the majority of players, it just doesn't go in line that way. Most people go to level up their guns, try loadouts. Because of the super casual friendly element, there's different things. You get the unlimited respawns until the timer runs out as long as somebody's alive. If people loot or buy stuff, it cuts down that timer, so you're in a pretty good spot. There's tons of camping spots, but there's also tons of different plays that have long sight lines, and it accommodates all types of different play styles. So if you're a little bit more aggressive, you have tons of cover to maneuver around and use to your advantage. You have tons of different sight lines. You can snipe, you can use a shotgun, you can use whatever. So the loadout versatility in Rebirth is significantly higher because most of your engagements are within about 80 meters. Obviously, there are those one-offs depending on where you're at. It could be like 100, 120 meters, but that cutting it down to about 80 meters where you're going to get into that many gunfights or less is significantly different than Verdansk, where you will likely get into 80+ meter distances. So you get that different dynamic there where you can be using the AN94 where it's maybe way less practical on Verdansk, or maybe using the Scar or one of these other guns that maybe has way more recoil. That you can get away with it on Rebirth just because you're not expected to challenge somebody and take somebody out at 150 meters. On top of that, you still get the free loadout, which is kind of more casual friendly. The first spawn, when you land, you get a self-revive. So that's already baked in. That's like $4,000 that you save or cash. You also get the buy stations that have reduced costs. So if you want to buy certain things, you're guaranteed a fire sale every single match. So if you want to plan according, get streaked up, UAVs, precisions, go position with the heli, you can do that. There's tons of contracts. They're very congested, so you can do a ton of them and like not really have an issue for the number of players on the map. So there's a lot of things going for it that are casual, and it allows you to get in more reps, which are incredibly important. Also, that it plays more like a multiplayer, but it still has the battle royale elements. I think there's a lot of casual people that really like multiplayer, but that aren't fans of battle royale. And Warzone has brought a lot of that community into the battle royale genre, even though it's not like a true like hardcore battle royale like we've seen with some of the other games. They've kind of adapted it to bring in a more casual audience. Well, Rebirth does that, but it does that even further because of the elements I just listed. Also, like because you get the engagement, it has a little bit of faster pace like a multiplayer. It's less methodical. So you don't have to think as much. Obviously, positioning and rotations and how you choose gunfights is important, but it's not as important as Verdansk, where like you die and you're likely not coming back. But one of the biggest things that I think is drawing a lot of people towards Rebirth is that although it's not a new map, what happens is when Rebirth came out, there's plenty of people that I knew up until about a month ago, they essentially had 0 time played on Rebirth. They were still hooked on Verdansk. We had the 1984 version, which kind of changed stuff up, but for the most part, it's essentially the same map with the facelift. And people kind of played that for a while, and eventually Burnout hit, and then they started to play Rebirth. So even though Rebirth is a fairly old map, it's been out for about a year almost, it still doesn't have that Burnout feel, because if people have already played 1,000 matches on Verdansk, they're already getting to the point where they're kind of burnt out. Versus Rebirth, they could have sub 100, 200 matches. So they got a lot of playtime before they're going to actually feel burnt out. So even though it's not a new map, it's new to a lot of players that never gave it a chance. The other thing that I think has helped is sites like this called Rebirth Sweats, which I'll link near the top of the description. Warzone Ranked kind of does it as well. But what ends up happening is there's a lot of people that have a ton of playtime in Verdansk. So their stats essentially do not move. If you're at a 2, you just kind of stay at a 2. It might go down slightly after a month. It might go up slightly after a month of performing well. But for the most part, it kind of stays stagnant because you have so many kills, so many deaths, so many matches. So you really do not have that incentive or motivation to really see your progress. Versus with Rebirth, if you haven't had that many matches, now you get to actually see their progress. So in this particular case, if I go to kind of like the seriousness of how much I took it, right when it came out, I'm one of those people that did not try Rebirth kind of at all. I played 3 matches. It was trios, kind of did my thing, whatever. I didn't really care too much about it. I probably played with a couple people who were like, hey, go try this out. Boom, you're good to go. Season 2, I played a little bit more, had 171 matches. You can kind of see my stats. Not all that impressive. I was playing with a lot of sweaty people, so I played a little bit more aggressive. I had a lot more respawns. In Season 3, I started playing a little bit more with randoms. And what will happen with randoms is your win percentage will go down because more often than not, they die out. But I kind of figured out how to play the map a little bit different, the nuances of it, the loadout, how to time stuff, and you slowly improve over time. Then when Season 4 hit, you can see how much playtime I had. I had 500 games just in that season alone with 156 wins. I was still playing with a lot of randoms, but I also started to get a little bit better where I would die less. I try to focus on increasing my kills while dying less, which it sounds easier than it is, but it essentially you go about kind of understanding what you should be using, the meta versatility in certain maps. Maybe you just vibe with certain metas when they're going on. Maybe I wasn't a fan of the R9 shotgun meta, but then I'm a fan of the Kilo meta, or vice versa. I mean, you got a lot of different metas that change over time, and there's way more stuff viable. And it's just like, if the meta's not fun, then it's kind of like, I'm not really that engaged. I really enjoyed the game a lot. Season 4, I played the hell out of it. Then when we go to Season 5, I have 150 games played with the 50% win rate. I'm playing with more stacked teams, playing a little smarter, less randoms, and my kills per match are going up, and then my KD overall is going up, but I got to see that progress over time. Even though, like, if you look at my last 20 matches, it's even higher than that number. So I have over a 3 KD, last 20 matches, 7 kills per game, score per minute, everything is up. And obviously that's based off the last 20 matches. And you can see how you compare to basically the average player, what they're getting. Most players will get 0 kills. Next will be 1, 2, 3, and then it drops all the way off. Most people are not getting over 12 kills, whereas you can kind of see the distribution. More often than not, I'm getting about 6-ish kills at 5.5 lifetime, or 7 in my most recent games. And you can kind of get a lot of different stats from that. And I think that's what's really driving people to play it, because you can feel a sense of like you're actually improving, versus, like I said, with Warzone on Verdansk, it's not the same. So along with the games being faster, you're going to be able to get more reps in the different areas. You could feel a lot of your deficiencies that you have. Some people struggle with the landing hot. So they always land on the outskirts of the map. They never get any engagements. So instead of actually improving that aspect, they just neglect it and neglect it and neglect it. And then they're just reducing the number of engagements they get. They're not building any confidence. They're not working on improving that as a skill. Versus with this, you are likely going to land near someone. You're going to have to work with the floor loot, communicate, and wipe that team, then loot and get a loadout. Sometimes it isn't contested and you get lucky and whatever, but you're going to be more likely to get in a contested gunfight in Rebirth right when you land than in Verdansk, because the map is so large. You can do a stretch drop, you can do all kinds of stuff where you're not going to get a competitive drop, and this can allow you to accelerate those reps because you land and it's mostly going to be hot right off the beginning, almost no matter where you land. There are almost always at least one team that lands nearby that you can get a gun and then challenge right away. Also, the looting, how fast you have to loot. If you're taking too long, other people you're going to run up against are going to get loadouts because the cost of loadouts are reduced. So you have to be a little bit quicker, and it helps you with that efficiency, so that when you are playing the Verdansk map or the new Pacific map, when it drops, you're going to be in the habit of, okay, this is how fast I need to go to get this stuff together so I can have my loadout, because looting is incredibly important to get the loadout, because once you get the loadout, then you have your guns that you're comfortable with, regardless if that's the Kilo, the MP5, or the Cold War guns, right? You have the flexibility there. Obviously, the other part that it can help with is regaining. There's a lot of times in a point within a match where you're like, damn, they're just camping our loadout. Then you think, all right, cool. You know, let's take a pause here. Instead of just landing there and getting shot a bunch of times, even though I got spawn protection, I land, I get demolished. Instead of doing that, let's go ahead and try and land somewhere where there's a scav. Let's look at the map, grab that, regain, and then you're good to go. And you're pretty much set up that way. So I think there's a lot of elements there, and you're seeing a lot more content creators jump on it because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, where they just haven't had those reps, so there's way less burnout. They can still enjoy it, and there's tons of great plays to be had, a lot of fun, finessing. And I think because more players are switching over there, the skill base is feeling a little bit stronger, because a lot of times skill base is based off the population size. So the more people that play a mode, the more likely it is to have stricter skill-based matchmaking, versus if there's less and it's not a lot of people, like we saw with the realism mode, it's not just not that popular. Same thing with plunder. You may run into sweats here and there, but for the most part, the overall average, median, all the KDs and stats, score per minute, wins, win rate, all that stuff is just generally lower. I think we're experiencing that with Rebirth because it's become more popular. It still feels like it has a little bit stricter skill-based matchmaking, despite it being a less popular mode for so long. So if you're looking to jump into it and you feel like you want to learn a little bit more about it, I have tons of content on my second channel, but there's a lot of great content creators that are currently playing that, and they are the top of the top when it comes to Rebirth, and that's almost what they play exclusively, unless they're competing in tournaments over in Verdansk. So the first one we'll go ahead and talk about is Baby Dillster. We've covered him before on the channel. I believe he did hold the world record for the most kills in a match. Obviously, he had a team effort. They were calling in UAVs. but regardless, he still dropped 47, which is crazy. And when you look at his overall stats, he actually, you know, it's kind of crazy. His stats aren't as high as some of the other people that play this, but he plays at a very high pace. He has over a 3 KD pretty much all of the seasons. One of the seasons it was slightly lower, but he usually averages double digits. And there are certain elements when you are watching a player that there's things that you're just not going to be able to replicate. They're either younger, better reflexes, a lot of playtime. But there are certain things where maybe they handle a certain situation that you can definitely learn from. So I would definitely check out Dilster. I'm going to leave links to their channels down in the description. If you guys are looking for a console player, we can go ahead and check out the #1 console player, which we've also covered on the channel, and that is Reedboy on Twitch. He actually has some of the highest stats in all of Rebirth. Pretty high in Verdansk as well. You can see that he right now his all-time is almost a 5 KD with almost 12 kills per game. But he also has one of the highest win percentages at 62%. So he also gets the high kills, but also goes for the win. And he's doing this all on a standard PS5, I believe, with the 80 FOV, well, maybe 120 frames. I'm not 100% sure, but you can see generally they have a decent amount of consistency. 4.5 when it started, 4.89, 4.7, 4.8. So he kind of stays right around that 4.8. But his average kills are kind of been stayed about the same other than the first season where you kind of have a little bit of that learning curve. And last but not least is Knight. He has currently the record for the longest win streak. They won 117 matches in a row. It took them over a 5-day span. They didn't play all the matches in one day, but they did separate gaming sessions where they basically just went winning. And you can see overall his KD is about a 4.5 with the 13 kills per game. This is what separates him. He gets a lot of kills consistently, and they drop a lot of kills, 40s throughout season 5. And you can see he wasn't even a Rebirth guy. This is an example of the scenario where he only played 26 games in the first season. He only played 24 games in the second season. 16 games in season 3, and then season 4 he actually dedicated a lot more time to the mode and then invested almost exclusively in the mode. So he had 1,600 matches just in season 5 alone with over 800 wins. So an absolute monster. Like I said, I would definitely go check out any of these. They have YouTube channels and Twitches if you want to go ahead and kind of pick their brain live. And that's kind of where it is. I do see what Rebirth has done and why it's been so popular and why it's carrying Warzone at the moment. And I think there's still things that Warzone can do. Hopefully the Haunting of Verdansk is solid. That'll carry us through to the Vanguard integration and some of those things. They experiment with more modes. They should have all the modes available to us. If a mode goes in there and it takes longer to fill and it's not populated, who cares? At the end of the day, offer the modes. If people want to play them, let them play it. So that's solos, duos, trios, quads. Obviously, kind of stick to it as many. So at least there's an option for everyone, because I know that sometimes it can feel a little limiting, especially when you love one mode over another. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.